product provided by Nintendo. Thank you. Nintendo Switch Online has a ton of great games, but today I'm going to talk about some of the best, and some more that I would love to see come to the service at some point. Since the early days of Pokemon, there have been a ton of spin-offs, and one of my favorites has always been Pokémon Snap. The idea of Pokémon Snap sounds insane, being an on-rails first-person shooter, but you're shooting pictures. And if you look right this way, you'll see a gaggle of wild Lopunny. Finally! Like most on-rail shooters, this is very short, with there only being 6 levels and 63 Pokemon. I do really wish they added one more, but I forgive them for now. Each of the 6 levels is a different habitat for Pokemon to inhabit, and most of them have hidden routes that you can unlock by interacting with the world. You start each run with a limited amount of film, and you're tasked with taking the best photos of Pokemon by any means necessary. This reminds me a lot of the Safari Zone from earlier Pokemon games, where even though you don't have Pokemon of your own, you are by no means helpless. You're given apples that bait Pokemon to move them where you want, and other balls that you can throw to annoy them. And I enjoyed this a little too much. But having a limited amount of film and time means you have to do whatever you can to set up your shots perfectly before you miss your chance. There have been so many times where I'll get so close to getting a perfect shot only to barely miss it, which is incredibly frustrating in a very good way. At the end of a level, you look at the pictures you've taken and submit one to Professor Oak. And no matter what grade I get on the picture, I always want to do better. And finding all of the hidden paths and secrets in the world not only adds to the replay value, but it also gives us one of the best examples of what the Pokemon world is really like. Growing up, I would rent this from the video game store whenever I could. And now that I have both this and new Pokemon Snap on the Switch, I go back to this pretty frequently because it is still so much fun. Just like Pokémon Mystery Dungeon Red Rescue Team. I am still very confused why this got added because there is a full remake available on this console already, but if it gets even a single new person to try out Pokémon Mystery Dungeon, I will not complain. Like with most Pokémon Mystery Dungeon games, you start off with a quiz. Because what better thing to have in the beginning of a game than a questionnaire? Alright class, it's quiz time. Do not start until I tell you otherwise. Oh, my favorite! I can't read this language. That is kindergarten English. The personality quiz determines what Pokemon you'll play as. You also get to pick a partner Pokemon who will be your best friend throughout your journey, and together the two of you start a Pokemon rescue team to help Pokemon in need. The bulk of the gameplay comes from you going through randomly generated floors in dungeons. Your goal is always the same, but whenever you enter a dungeon, it's going to be slightly different. And though it's a little basic, the gameplay is pretty good. But by far, the best part of this game is the story. The earlier Pokemon titles were not known for having the best stories, but with the release of Red and Blue Rescue Team, that started to change. Your character is a human who got turned into a Pokemon with no memory of how they became one in the first place, and you and your partner go through all of the ups and downs of this journey together. And no matter how many times I've played it, the characters you meet and the journey you go on to figure out why you got turned into a Pokemon in the first place is always fun. Being the first game in the series, the gameplay is not as good as it is in the later entries, but if you have never played a Pokemon Mystery Dungeon game, this is the best way to get into the franchise hands down. And though Pokemon is the highest grossing media franchise ever, they're still not Nintendo's mascot because that title goes to Mario. Super Mario World is arguably one of the most iconic video games of all time. As a pack-in title for the Super Nintendo, pretty much everyone who has seen the console has played it. This is arguably one of the greatest pack-in games of all time, and it still holds up incredibly well to this day. Ever since the original, the Mario formula has been tried and true. They didn't need to reinvent the wheel because they had something that worked. Pretty much every Nintendo console has a game where Mario runs, jumps, and crushes everything in his path. But what made Super Mario World so special was Yoshi. This doesn't take place in the Mushroom Kingdom, it takes place in Dinosaur Land. Another example of Nintendo flexing their creative muscles when coming up with a name. Not only are you rescuing Peach, you're also trying to free all of the Yoshis that have been taken. Throughout the years, there has been a load of 2D Mario games that have shown off just how flexible this plumber is. But to me and a lot of other people, Mario World is looked at as one of the greatest Mario adventures of all time. Whether you're flying through levels with the cape or finding every hidden exit, there is enough in this game to keep you playing for decades. And I know that because I have been doing it. Whenever we get a new 3D Mario game, the world erupts. The formula is arguably perfect, and that all started with Mario 64. A game that is so universally beloved that I'm sure if you said a single bad thing about it, someone would show up at your door. This isn't my favorite 3D Mario game. You know, I could have sworn someone was about to bust down the door.
Sorry I'm late. How dare you?
With this being the first Mario game that brought the series into 3D, it easily could have been way worse than this. The transitional era from the Super Nintendo to the Nintendo 64 was hard for a lot of developers, but Mario's leap into 3D was arguably the greatest to ever do it, and it was further proof that Mario could fit pretty much anywhere. There is a magic in this game that is hard to put into words. Jumping into a painting to explore a world feels incredible, and all of the worlds having their own personality and charm makes the overall experience a blast to get through from start to finish. And just like Super Mario World, there are a ton of secrets to explore when you're going through Peach's castle. I have collected the 120 stars in this game a few times now, and whenever I do, I feel like I'm gonna get bored of it, but that still hasn't been the case. This is a comfort game for generations of people, but I'm still shocked about how many people I meet that have not beaten it yet. And of all of Mario's adventures, this is one that I think people should not skip. And though this is looked at as one of the best Nintendo 64 games of all time, there is one game on the console that gave this a run for its money, and that was Iggy's Wreckin' Balls.
What?
Of course, I'm talking about The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. The game that has been the blueprint for all action-adventure games going forward. Though the official Zelda timeline is convoluted and hard to follow for the average person, you don't need to know all of the information to get into the series for the first time. And when people ask me what Zelda game they should play first, usually my answer is this. Not only does this bring you through one of the greatest journeys in gaming history, it also is one of the most accessible games in the entire franchise. Everything is set up and paced perfectly, so even a beginner can hop into the series and know exactly what to do. A lot of early adventure games were more or less a hack and slash that bring you through a 3D world. But for its time, and even to today's standard, this is incredibly deep even from the beginning. Whether you're timing attacks to hit an enemy's weak spot, or using the environment around you to solve puzzles, everything is set up in a way where you're encouraged to learn about the world around you. But to me, the best part about this is how they set up a world that feels alive. Of all of the Legend of Zelda games, this had the biggest jump in the amount of world building that was added to the franchise. Fan favorites like the Zora have made a return, even if they look a little bit different, and loads of brand new races are scattered throughout the world for you to meet for the first time ever. Getting to see the cultures and how they interact with the world is part of the magic that this game brings to the table. And all of that is on top of having some of my favorite dungeons in the entire franchise. There is a reason that to this day, this is still looked at as one of the greatest video games ever made. And even though I have beaten this countless times, I know I am still going to again in the future. Just like one of the other incredible games in the franchise, A Link to the Past. The original Zelda games going all the way back to the NES share the top-down format. Something they still do to this day and I genuinely enjoy. But since I've played A Link to the Past, none of the other top-down Zelda games have affected me in the same way. Starting off the game receiving a telepathic message to go save Zelda was an awesome idea. The original Legend of Zelda on the NES just dropped you into the world and let you go explore. As much as I love that idea, it makes it a little bit more difficult to begin your journey, so being brought on an epic quest right out of the gate feels incredible. It immediately starts you on the path of an epic journey, giving you context about why you're doing what you're doing. And this was the first time that the world of Hyrule felt like a true world to explore, full of towns and characters who will tell you a story about what's going on in their lives. And having two full worlds to explore, even if they're mostly identical, is still great. The journey may start off pretty simple, but as the game goes on, everything gets more complex and detailed, with brand new items making all of the dungeons more interesting than ever before. I could go on for hours about why I love A Link to the Past, but having both versions available on Nintendo Switch Online is fantastic. I am a sucker for any game that has Kirby in it, and Superstar was one of my first adventures. For its time, having 9 separate games on one cartridge was an incredible deal. Granted, most of these are very small compared to a typical Kirby adventure. Back in the day, having this big of a variety was unreal. Whether you're playing Dynablade, The Great Cave Offensive, or The Revenge of Meta Knight, the games were similar but distinct enough that exploring them all was a delight. Though none of these adventures on their own are anywhere close to Kirby's best, they come together to make a solid package that is still worth checking out almost 30 years later. Superstar was also the first time that Kirby got full movesets for most of his copy abilities. Prior to this, most of Kirby's abilities were very simple, usually requiring only one button to do any action, but now the copy abilities had a solid range of uses. Having a full remake of Dreamland on its own was enough to keep me interested, and though most of the minigames are simple, they are still very enjoyable. But there's also one of the most unique Kirby games of all time with Kirby the Crystal Shards. While other series were busy jumping jumping into full 3D environments, Kirby decided to stay more or less the same. This retains the series' gameplay of being a 2D platformer, but this time there are a lot of new things that have never been seen in a Kirby game before or since. The coolest of which being the fact that you can combine any two power-ups together to see what happens. And this is by far the best part of this game and one of the coolest things a Kirby game has ever done. Combining spark and ice together turns you into a refrigerator.
But if I eat ice and electricity, I have to go to the hospital. Life's just not fair.
None of the levels are very complex, but each of them has 3 hidden crystal shards that you can find. Sometimes they require a specific copy ability in order to get them, which can be annoying. But if you collect them all, the game has a different ending which makes it all feel worth it. The music and cutscenes are incredible all the way through, and though this is a very short Kirby adventure, it is still one of the coolest. And this was the perfect game to just mess around for a few hours to have fun. Over the last few years, Metroid has finally started to get more attention. And whenever someone asks me where they should start with the series, I always tell them Zero Mission. Though you technically could start with any game in the franchise, including Prime, I think Zero Mission is the best because it's a remake of the original on the NES.
So why would I not start with the original to see how this series began? What, do you like pain?
Though the original is still pretty good, I think Zero Mission improves every single aspect of the game, making it the best way to experience this story. You still play as Samus on a quest to destroy all of the Metroids and the Mother Brain, but every part of the experience feels more fluid. The gameplay struck a perfect balance, feeling like a mix between Metroid Fusion and Super Metroid, where Samus is faster and heavier, and honestly, I love how this feels. It does take a bit to get used to, especially if you're used to other Metroid games, but the fast pace works well, especially because this was released on the Game Boy Advance. This was also the first time that we got to play as Zero Suit Samus in a game. And though it feels very different than the typical Metroid gameplay, I still really like the change of pace. It's roughly 4 hours long, so it's not a big investment at all. And to this day, it's still one of my favorite Game Boy Advance games of all time, and is up there with my favorite 2D Metroids right behind Super Metroid. There's a reason that every single Metroid game that has come out since has been compared to this. Super Metroid throws you directly into the action with one of the most action-packed intro sequences I have ever experienced in a game. Fighting Ridley, who looks like an absolute menace, and escaping a compound as it literally falls apart around you set the tone for the game going forward. No matter how many times you do it, exploring Zebes feels great. The way progression works in this game is so great, unlocking new items in order to access new areas, which opens the world even more. Passing doors you can't yet open gives you a reason to want to come back and explore the world. And whether you're fighting small enemies you see around the world or giant bosses, everything about this adventure feels fantastic. Super Metroid is one of the very few games that I never think needs to get a remaster, and I'm glad to see that Metroid is back making great games that deserve all of the attention. It doesn't matter if everybody else has, but I will never forget about Star Fox. Flying through a world doing barrel rolls, shooting everything you possibly can is endlessly engaging. And though we haven't gotten one in a very long time, Star Fox 64 is on Nintendo Switch Online, and I have played this more than I am willing to admit.
What are you doing it here? It's 3 in the morning. Barrel rolls!
Star Fox 64 is an on-rail shooter where you fly to different planets throughout the galaxy, completing different objectives in order to get to the end. Each level has a few different challenges that you can do, and depending on what you select, you will have a different planet to go to next. And this is one of my favorite things about the game. Each time you beat the game, you most likely get a little bit better. And you can actively use those skills in order to have a different experience on your next playthrough. And when you combine that with the medals and score system, you're left with a game that encourages you to come back as many times as you can to see everything there is to offer. Though there's not really a lot to it, Star Fox 64 offers a gameplay experience that you can't get in any other Nintendo game. And I'm really hoping that someday we get a brand new Star Fox, even though at this point I'm not holding my breath. Though they got acquired by Microsoft, Rare is best known for their work with Nintendo. Most notably the Donkey Kong Country series, which are some of the best platformers of all time. In the first game, you play as Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong going on a mission to get back all of DK's bananas, and that's pretty much it.
This is the best story ever written.
Though there is barely any plot whatsoever, what makes this game so highly regarded isn't the story, it's the incredible gameplay, atmosphere, and music that come together to make this a perfect experience. The jump in graphics from the NES to the Super Nintendo was massive. And these are some of the best looking games on the entire console. Everything from the character sprites to the backgrounds have an insane level of detail, and the level design is some of the best we have ever seen in a platformer before or since. Each level is full of hidden secrets and collectibles that are fun to obtain, but most importantly, you are rewarded for playing well. You can easily get through most of this game barely collecting anything, missing out on all of the hidden secrets that make this experience even better. But the players who put in the time to get really good are given extra experiences the average player won't get. And the sequels are just as good and in a lot of ways better than the original. In Donkey Kong Country 2, you play as Diddy Kong and Dixie Kong.
Where is Donkey Kong? This is like playing a Zelda game where you can't play as Zelda.
Though you don't get to play as Donkey Kong, you do spend the entire game trying to save him. And just like the first game, everything is as polished as you can possibly imagine, with brand new mechanics like being able to throw your partner in order to reach things you can't reach on your own. And though Donkey Kong Country 3 is definitely the strangest of the trio, I still find it to be incredibly enjoyable. This time you play as Dixie and Kiddy Kong, on a quest to save both Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong who have mysteriously disappeared. Though people mostly talk about the first two games, this is still really good. It is by far the best looking game in the series, and even on the Super Nintendo as a whole. They got pretty creative with the level design here, with most of the levels having a strange gimmick, some of which are very good and others drive me up a wall, but ultimately everything you've heard about the Donkey Kong Country games is true. They are challenging but rewarding, and I can see the argument for these being the best games released on the Super Nintendo. But this is not the only series that Rare made. Arguably my favorite series on the N64, Banjo-Kazooie. Like Rare's other games, the story is pretty simple, with Banjo trying to rescue his sister back from the evil witch Gruntilda, who kidnapped her because she was better looking.
Yeah, so is Bottles, but he didn't get kidnapped.
The goal may be simple, but the journey you go on to get there is so much fun. The dialogue between characters is ridiculous throughout the entire game. Usually if characters are having a conversation in a game I've played before, I will skip through it, but the way that characters flagrantly insult each other is entertaining no matter how many times I read it. But of course, the thing that everybody remembers this game for was the incredible gameplay. This is one of the many collectathons that came out during this era, but it's arguably one of the best. There are 9 worlds in the game that you get to explore, each having their own charm, and a ton of different things to collect. Each world has a total of 10 jigsaw pieces which you need to get through the game. You get the jiggies by fighting characters or completing various tasks throughout the world, but collecting them all feels great no matter what world I'm in. Throughout the entire journey, the exploration and platforming is fun and tight, and the level design is up there with games like Mario 64 for being some of the best on the entire console. And there are so many games that I have played on Nintendo Switch Online, both with and without the expansion pass, that easily makes this one of my favorite things about the Switch. Of course, I can't talk about every game on the service because there are too many, but whether you want to check out the origins of your favorite series, try out a franchise you haven't experienced yet, or even just check out some obscure games just because you can, there's a good variety of games for everyone. And these are all games you can play on the Switch 1. But if you have a Switch 2, you can play GameCube games like Mario Strikers and Wind Waker, and of course, so many more down the line. And that's before all of the online games like Tetris 99, Mario Kart, and Splatoon. And going forward, there are a bunch of games that I would love to see come to the service. The most important of which being the Pokemon games from the Game Boy Color and the Game Boy Advance. On the 3DS, we were given the Generation 1 and 2 Pokemon games available on the eShop. And I think now would be the perfect time to give us those back and the Game Boy Advance games on this service. There is already plenty of games on the service as it is, but adding these to the library would break the internet.
Midas, great news! Did you hear we achieved world peace yesterday? Oh, that's cool.
And today we're getting Pokemon Emerald on Nintendo Switch Online.
Really? This is the best day ever!
Of course, there are more games I would love to see, like Kirby Air Ride, Twilight Princess, and all of the Mario parties from the GameCube. But even as it stands, I think Nintendo Switch Online is a great deal. I've been a member for over 6 years, and I don't see that stopping anytime soon. And if you like retro games and can afford it, I think it's worth checking out.
Why are you crying?
I just realized that we finally have the chance to have Kirby Air Ride and Mario Baseball on the Switch.
I despise you sometimes.